Hello, I am Pastor Joan, and I am here in the fellowship hall at one of my congregations to talk about one of what I found at least to be one of the most confusing and therefore most daunting pieces of audio equipment that I've needed to interact with during pandemic. Never thought that I would before, and that is our congregation's audio mixer board. I betcha if you are a pastor of a small country church like mine, you probably have something that looks similar or a device like this somewhere in your church building. And we're going to talk a little bit today about what all of these buttons are and what we should do with all of the buttons to make them work properly. And then I'll show you one thing that we're doing. So it'll be one part show and tell with our portable mixer board.
Okay, so here is a closer shot of our congregation's, well, one of our mixer boards. This is a Behringer, it's a Zenny 1202, and it's called, to be specific, an 8-channel analog mixer. So the first thing, if you're going to want to use this, is you're going to want to plug it in. So I already plugged this into a source of power, but you'll see that this cord, maybe if I can get it to focus in, has 4 prongs in it that all need to be in the exact sort of position that they need to be in. And I have used tape to draw an arrow on this. And then I have also taken the time to draw an arrow on the input for power. It says AC power in on our mixer here so that I can always plug this in exactly the right spot every time without having to futz around very much. This mixer board is going inside and outside and is being used in 2 different locations every Sunday. So it gets plugged in and plugged out for us. Also, I pastor a congregation that is very close to the Mississippi River, and there is a lock and dam in our town. And when I think about what this mixer board does, I'm kind of thinking about water and how water flows. So if you think about the sound kind of as the water in the river, so the mixer board does kind of what the lock and dam does. It has some controls of what water and what levels it takes water in at, and then also how much water and at what levels it outputs that water. So it has some things to help us figure out how to take sound into the board, and then it has things for us to take sound out of the board. So the first thing that you're going to need in order for this to work, besides power of course, is you're going to need ways for sound to get into the board from microphones, and you're going to need ways for sound to travel away from the board. And I also have a set of microphones here. So on our board here, you'll see this spot here, it says phones. That's for a pair of headphones. And it has what's called a TS plug. That's this thing. And most headphones don't have that, so I had to get an adapter for that. It's just a 3.5 to a TS. It gets plugged right there into that spot, and now I can listen to the audio that is being produced in this mixer using this output, this piece of equipment. And so that's super great. There are going to be 2 other types of inputs to this board. The first is from what's called an XRL cable. So here are the ends of the XRL cable. This is very, very typical of like a standing microphone that your church might have. This is the male end, this is the female end. So the female end is going to meet, of course, your microphone or maybe the output jack in a wireless lapel receiver. And that is going to go to your mixer board. Ours I have set to work this microphone on channel 1, so I will plug it in there. Just for our purposes right now, it doesn't really matter. And then we're going to have some outputs. So I have actually labeled our outputs here, but this one is, it says FX send on it, and it's what we use to send signal to our congregation's FM transmitter radio. And then these two are going to go into the main out. This is what goes to our computer and to any cell phone device that we would be recording. And I just used this cable. Now notice, it's a red cable that we've labeled with red tape. And there's a left channel and a right channel. There's no real difference between those channels except that we're paying attention to what's on the left and the right in case there's a reason later that we need to know that. And then my similar cable to this that goes to the FM transmitter, I have labeled with yellow. And that just helps us much more quickly take care of things. Now also notice we've put this tape and the yellow tape on this side. So I know that if I'm not getting enough volume to the radio transmitter, but I am getting enough volume to the cell phone or computer, that I can turn one or the other of these up. You'll also notice that I have marked all of these channels with a painter marker. This is something that comes inside and outside a lot for our congregations, and so it's super helpful that I've just kind of marked the settings of where I know everything pretty much goes, just in case the mixer board gets banged up or moved around along the way. But what are all of these other buttons all about? So this microphone, right? It comes in here, and you may have one that's got one of those TRS or TS cords, balanced or unbalanced for the purpose of this microphone. It goes here, and it hits the gain, or a sound person might also call this the trim. And I like to think of the gain or the trim as kind of like volume. Think like your faucet and how you are able at the point of your faucet to adjust the amount of water that comes in and out of your sink at any given time. That's sort of what the gain does here for us. I believe it's the proper terminology is to call it that it monitors or manages the input signal to the mixer board. So it's hard to see, but our gain is set kind of here to like, well, it's set at like -20. Most people start with the gains like straight in the middle, and then they adjust as far as they need to, depending upon what you hear in your microphones with your input. Okay, so that's going to be a very important button when you're trying to, well, knob, when you're trying to figure out how to make your mixer make you have sound that's nice. These blue buttons here, those are called the equalizer buttons. And you can see that for this microphone, I have them mostly set near the middle or just off the middle. But this mic jack, I typically plug my lapel mic into, and that's set for my voice, which is rather quite high. And so in order to make me sound the best, I did have to turn it down about, to about a quarter of the way up, if you would. And then I also turned some of the low frequency for me up a little bit, and also on the standing microphone. And then this mixer has a button here for low cut, it says. And so what that is to do is that takes the lower frequency sounds and it cuts them, it chops them off. And I found that when I operate this particular mixer for our congregation's use, we all sound a lot better if I leave that low cut in the in position. Yeah, it just makes us sound a lot better. And changing how much of what resonance you get from someone's voice can be really, really helpful in making them sound very good. Okay, then the next couple buttons we have here, you'll notice that I have them all marked in directly in the straight up position because we're not doing any of that. This would be if you were doing FX, and that would be kind of like a fancier thing to do. That would be something that someone that was an audio technician that was like doing live mixing for you might want to be futzing with or using. And yeah, I'm not so into that. And then the next knob, you see these are all just straight up at the 0 again, are the pan knobs. And you might find these called pot switches because these are really potentometers, if you would. And again, for our purposes at the church, we're not doing any live mixing. We have no reason to be using the potentometer. Now, you've noticed maybe, if you're paying attention, that the lines on these knobs don't match the lines that I have painted onto the mixer board. That's because if a mic isn't plugged in, you can get extra noise that you don't want to on your channel if you let that level be up at all. So I turn these typically into the down position when we're not using the mixer, but I've marked where we want them to be. So for this particular microphone, I would take this level up to there. Level, like gain, is a way to control the amount of volume, the way that the sound is going through this system, if you will. But think more level is, the gain is how much of the sound that you're going to run through this equalizer FX sort of part of your river. And then the level is how much of that sound are you going to send out into the main channel over to here. I hope that that makes a little bit of sense to some of you. These 4 are regular old microphone inputs, and that's how these work. These 4 channels here, 1, 2, 3, 4, are controlled by these, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they only have 3 sets of knobs because they are meant for stereo inputs. So you would put either balanced or unbalanced. Balanced is always better if you can have balance. And then you would depress this if you're using FX or not if you're not using the FX settings, and you're able to control the amount of, well, you're able to balance the microphone, I should say, and then you're able to control the amount of level, the amount of that sound that you put into the main mixer. Sometimes a microphone needs phantom power. This one does. So when using this microphone, we would depress this and you would see that this light comes on saying that we have 48 volts that are now running as phantom power throughout this system. When you're not using that, I suggest not depressing it because there's no reason to have that power running through this system. This you would depress if you were sending sound to a CD or to control room. Same thing to a mixer of some sort. And then this is if you were sending your FX channel straight to the control room. You would depress that, you would put this in. This button here controls the amount of total sound that you are sending to these headphones, so for you to listen to, or over to the control room if this was going to be having outputs here in order to do that type of recording. Most of us at churches aren't going to be using those. Most of us are going to be using these sorts of things. And then this is the main button, the slider. Some of these sorts of mixer boards will have two of these. They'll have like a left channel and a right channel, and that might be because like you're using two sets of speakers in your sanctuary, and some of them are on the left channel and some of them are on the right channel, and you can actually control how much volume goes to the left speakers and how much goes to the right speakers. But for the most part, our left and right channel, typically on most of the boards that I have seen, get put in the same position or more or less the same position anyway. So I'm okay with this board being simple in that sort of way. And you can see that I've ticked and marked off all of those things. So what happens is the sound comes in here. We decide how much of the sound we want to let in. We use the equalizers to change and augment the sound and how that sound sounds and make it sound better, like conditioning our water, if you would. Also, these FX things and the potentiometer, they can change and condition the water further. Then we decide how much of that water we're going to let out to the main outputs. And then we let the water flow back out, the sound flow back out. So that's the little bit that I, as a non-expert, know about how a mixer board functions, and I hope that by taking the time to explain it to you today, that maybe this will be less daunting to you the next time that you need to talk to someone about your church's mixer board, or if you need to do something like this during this time for yourself. Okay, bye.